How are you doing, everybody? Did you miss me? Well, sadly got into a bunch of card trouble, but luckily we're back, and I finally caught up on the endgame version of our Minion build here, and I wanted to talk about the different things that the community in general has learned over this past week playing through the season, and some of the explanations for why you might be seeing some differences between different build guides. Let's go ahead and talk about Mage Minions now that I've been playing it in the endgame, and I'm going to roll you some tier 100 pit footage. I was able to do this on the gear that I currently have. I'll show you all of that later, with glyphs at level 90. I'm only Paragon level 205, so I'm still missing a ton of power. But as of the recording of this video, I believe that Shadow Mage has already cleared 106. I think Ronnie has a clearer at that level. So let's go ahead and talk about the build. Some of the changes you're going to see coming to the planner. I've been using the one that I already had, and just generally the good practices for this build in general. So if you haven't seen the build at all, Mage Minion has splashed onto the scene as the definitive way to play minions in Season 9. With the addition of the Hand of Nas, or as I like to call them, Big Nas X gloves, basically what ends up happening is that you sacrifice all your minions except for your mages, and for each one that you would have had, you gain a mage instead. Now, there are some issues with this. There's a little bit of a bug, pretty drastically reducing the damage output, but we'll touch on that a little bit later on. But the cool thing is they have better AoE clear because their attacks are now going to randomly trigger shattering effects that will hit multiple targets. They're able to teleport to you, so they're actually able to get out of the way of danger, and most notably get out of the way of crowd controls, since they gain a very minuscule amount of unstoppable when they teleport. It makes them a little bit easier to handle, a little bit easier to move around the field of combat, and while it's nowhere near as good as just being able to target an enemy in general, it has gone a long way to make the gameplay feel significantly smoother. And while I think at this point we have largely figured out what the best way of building this build is, I want to very quickly talk about two of the options that you might have seen around there. One that I was helping to perpetuate, and two, the one that the majority of people have generally decided is the best way, and now that I've had time to test it in high-level pits, I think that I agree, even though technically, on paper, the math doesn't really support it. Where you're going to see a lot of the time is the use of Soul Rift as the ultimate skill. Now, I was very hopeful that Unyielding Commander was going to be able to be used as the ultimate skill, especially in high-level pit, where basically you need to be able to trigger cooldown reduction through Decrepify by applying the curse through Blood Moon Breaches fast enough to have high enough uptime on it to be able to outperform the difference of the 15% damage multiplier from Soul Rift and the 50% damage multiplier from Grasping Veins Aspect. And try as I might, I just can't get it there. I even tried some interesting things with using Variana as the mercenary to get even more lucky hit chance procs. And while our uptime on Unyielding Commander by having Army of the Dead running was very good, I would put it somewhere around 70 or 80% uptime. For whatever reason, I just was not getting the same clear speeds as I was in the footage that you're currently looking at. Now, there's a couple different things to consider here. Obviously, the desert map is so much better. Maybe the mob density was just a little bit different on the other maps that I ran, but I did 2 or 3 attempts and I just never outperformed this. So I definitely think that Soul Rift is just bar for bar the better option here, although you would see higher damage output by using Unyielding Commander and Army of the Dead. So that might just be a better tool for being able to boss. Maybe you bring it into the world boss or something like that, or if you're just trying to impress people with the biggest billions of damage that you could possibly do. Oh, and to that point, right now, the biggest procs that I'm seeing from the addition of the Cax rune and just the base damage of Mendeln itself, I'm doing somewhere in the ballpark of 100 to 150 billion damage per Mendeln procs. It definitely goes a bit higher than that on better gear, but once you see my gear, I think you have a pretty good understanding of just how much power is left on this build in comparison to what I'm going to show you for my current kit. All in all, I would say that the build is just a blast to play. I'm just having an incredibly good time with it. It transitions well through the different content types. Like, I wouldn't say that it's the best speed farming build that you could imagine, but as far as being a pretty lazy speed farming build, it's kind of second to none. Your mages are just good at doing AoE damage. Once you have good gear, you trivialize all open world content. You trivialize the Infernal Hordes as well. And with the addition of some rune words, as well as just moving around some stats, you can also get pretty decent mobility onto the build. You always have to deal with the fact that your minions are always 1 or 2 steps behind you, but that's just the price that you pay for not really having to aim any of your skills. I also think that it's just really good for bossing, as long as you ignore Harbinger and Indarial, where you actually need to be able to target things, and sadly we just can't do that. But for everybody else, again, as long as you're just dodging the mechanics, the minions will kill the boss for you. I was able to start solo farming Torment for Belial very early on, way before I had any mythics on this gear. And I think I was only around like Paragon level 150 or so. I had a decent set of Hand of Naz at a decent Mendeln ring, and that was kind of good enough to carry me forward. So if you're still looking for, without question, the best leveling experience on the Necromancer, a really smooth transition into the endgame, and then just an overall very powerful build for the vast majority of content that you might want to do, then look no further. Let's talk about the Mage Minion build. The other thing that I see a lot of people kind of questioning is the idea of the difference between Titan's Fall and Skeleton Mages shoot twice. I cannot do any math in this game that ever makes Skeleton Mage fires twice equal the benefit that you get from Titan's Fall. Since the Skeleton Mage firing twice does not interact with Ring of Mendeln, it does not trigger it further. And even when you fully buff the shadow damage of your Mage minions, they end up doing somewhere around half the damage of a Mendeln proc, meaning they're only doing a third of your overall damage, meaning that multiplying that by 1.88 is nowhere near as powerful as just multiplying all of your damage by 1.5. And then the only other big departure as far as specific things from the previous guide to what you're going to be seeing now is I'm not necessarily sure that you actually need the lucky hit chance to be able to apply vulnerable here, especially if you are utilizing Thule as a method of getting a damage multiplier. This is applying vulnerable all the time. I have really good vulnerable application with Bone Prison. You can get vulnerable uptime with Corpse Tendrils, and then obviously Soul Rift. You may be asking, why do you care about vulnerable at all when you have Soul Rift? Soul Rift can't actually hit every single monster in a big pack, especially in the pit. So a lot of the times you actually don't have 100% uptime on vulnerable from this skill alone. That's why I try to have redundancies. But if this ends up changing a little bit in the future, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to brick your ring. It's not a massive loss. You don't have to go out and get a brand new ring altogether, but that's why you might see a difference there. But now what I want to very quickly do is just show you the quality of my gear so that you have a really good comparison point from what you currently have and what you should have if you're trying to build the ideal version of this. Because I can tell you, like, yeah, use Air Perdition, use Shroud of False Death, but obviously comparing your gear against my gear should give you a better understanding of like just how much more room you might have to grow and areas where I think that there are better outcomes than what I currently have. Ultimately, getting a GA on lucky hit chance for Air of Perdition seems to be the best. It helps with having better uptime on both Corpse Tendrils as well as Soul Rift, even against a single target. Yes, the GA on crit chance can help it so that you don't have to sit here and use skirmishers like I currently do, but there's just a lot of places where you can get additional crit chance from. I try to False Death is 2 GA. I got the GA on max life, which I think ultimately is what I would really want on this build. Yes, all stats is more damage, but the maximum life is just a really easy way for you to be able to stack up your maximum life, considering without the maximum life on my amulet, I am below 10k life, and at that point, I'm still getting one shot in different content types. Now, if I were to throw on something like a Redamine Buzz and then also an Elixir of Fortitude, I can get up to somewhere around like 14k life. Here I'm at 13k without the incense, but you typically wouldn't want to have maximum life on your amulet. So that's why I actually really like the GA on maximum life, both on Shroud of False Death as well as on my weapon, if I could find that, because it makes it a little bit comfier. If you're trying for max pit push, obviously you want to go with the thing that gets you more damage. My gloves are pretty good here, right? So I got 2 Masterwork crits on a GA for the Skeleton Mage Mastery. I would like to see another GA on the maximum life. The attack speed is whatever, the additive damage is whatever, and then obviously the maximum damage bonus on the actual aspect will help for better clear, and especially is much better for speed farming in things like Infernal Hordes. I only got 1 Masterwork crit on Hellbent Commander. Now obviously Hellbent Commander is still a bit bugged in that you don't get as many ranks to it as you should, considering its base ranks and the fact that it has a GA and multiple Masterwork crits. The only other stat that you care about this is the critical strike chance as far as Masterworking is concerned, but the damage multiplier down at the bottom is significantly more important. If you had a item power 750 Blood Moon Breaches with a 50% damage multi and then crap stats, that would still be better than even a multi-GA with a lower roll on the damage. For the boots, these are pretty insane boots. If I'm going to be honest with you, I dropped them myself. I've been offered upwards of like 35 billion gold for these because it turns out that GA armor, GA intelligence is really good. Now the GA armor is what I need to be able to hit my armor cap if I have my incenses burning as well. So that's how we're actually going to get up to the armor cap. When you're talking about endgame builds, this is pretty par for the course. But without the GA on armor here, it is a lot harder to reach that, and you'd have to end up spending more Paragon points for more armor than you would want to normally. You don't really have to worry about the movement speed. Along with Reaper's Pursuit and the movement speed from your Air of Perdition, you're going to be at cap fairly simply, even with just a normal roll on the temper for movement speed here. Two-handed Scythe with the GA on Int here. I was unwilling to actually try to Masterwork crit this onto Titan's Fall multiple times, so I am currently missing 4 additional skill ranks. Not only that, the rolls on it are generally okay, but my service and sacrifice is only at 180%. So instead of having a 3 times multiplier, I only have a 2.8. Pretty bad. The other funny thing here is that I do not have an Ahu rune. I just have never dropped one. So my uptime on Cax is actually very bad. While my maximum damage is higher because I'm going to overflow this by 200, I am just not getting as many Cax procs as I could be. And the faster you can trigger Cax, the better uptime you have on the damage multiplier overall. So that is actually a pretty massive reduction in my overall damage output on the build currently. For my amulet, I'm just not wearing it because the guardians keep summoning and they actually killed me while I was trying to record something. But right now, this amulet is actually very good for a different build. I am only able to get a GA int and I managed to roll Gloom. I just can't get a Hellbent Commander amulet to save my life. I have gambled every single obol for the past, I don't know, 3 days of gameplay and just haven't got one. So this one is definitely very, very low quality. You would rather have Hellbent Commander, obviously, and then Coalesce Blood. Gloom is only going to increase the base damage of their normal attacks and not actually increase the damage of men down. So we're missing out on a ton of damage here. Just as a sidebar, even if you don't need the critical strike chance from Grasping Veins, it is the highest damage multiplier for all of your damage that you can put onto the build. I saw some people recommending Damned, which is like just wrong. Even if you were to assume that your mages are 91% of the total damage output of your build in comparison to 9% on Ring of Mendel, which they are not, by the way. Your mages are about 30 to 40% of your damage output, which is kind of sad, but that's how strong this ring is. But even if they were 90% of your damage output, Grasping Veins increasing the damage of your mages and the Ring of Mendel still outperforms Damned's slightly higher damage increase for only your mage's damage. I just don't know what kind of math they're doing. If somebody could explain it to me, maybe let me know down in my comments. I'd love to hear from you. But Grasping Veins is just strictly better. Another quick note for Ring of Mendel, because I get this question a lot. Why is my build not doing damage? I have all the same gear. And it will always turn out that their Ring of Mendel is somewhere in like the 4,000 to 5,000 damage range. And they'll say something to me like, Mac, I have a 4 GA Ring of Mendel, but its damage roll is low. Is that okay? And the answer is just no. The only stat on this ring other than the damage that matters is the mastery ranks there. So getting a GA on the mastery ranks is the only thing that matters. The additive damage doesn't matter. The intelligence is nice, and the attack speed on the summon attack speed really doesn't matter in the end game. So the only thing that you care about is the damage value of the actual aspect. And even mine, I would love to get a perfect roll one with no GA on it. But luckily my GA outcomes and my masterwork outcomes were pretty good here. 2 crits on the mastery is very nice, with my last crit on intelligence, the only other stat that matters. But keep that in mind. If you ever want to understand how much damage you're losing, take the smaller number, like the number in blue, and divide it by the bigger number that it's shown. And that's what percentage of your damage output you're doing with your ring, just to give you an idea of how to quickly calculate it. If you don't need the crit chance from skirmishers and you don't need the resistances from defenders, which if you're using Rahir, it's a lot easier to hit, you would want to be using Reapers for the additional shadow damage here, but I currently need the crit chance, so I'm actually losing out on a little bit of damage. As far as the Paragon is concerned, it's all in the planner, so I'll just very quickly go through it. We have Gravekeeper in the main board, we have Dead Razor in the cult leader board. You don't care about things like the skeleton warrior damage, you just want to be very efficient through here. Up into Flesh Eater, we have Essence. Over into Scent of Death, we have Eliminator. And then down to Frailty, we have Exploit. Some people actually play around with Mage, and basically the thing with Mage here is it only has 1 damage multiplier, but it ends up giving you like 400 to 500 additive damage, which is very good. And especially on earlier game gear, if you somehow had a level 100 glyph but early game gear, a Mage outperforms most glyphs until you get into the end game where your additive damage is enough where adding more into that bucket doesn't outperform the loss of the damage multiplier, considering any other glyph that you would be using would also grant you additive damage, but in addition to that, grant you 2 different damage multipliers as opposed to just 1. But in the early game, if Mage is pre-leveled or leveled higher than other alternatives, very good glyph to use. So for this next section, I'll go pretty quickly through it. I don't want to bore you. Let's just go ahead and talk about some mechanics that are not immediately obvious that a lot of people have been asking me about, and also some bugs that we're running into on the build. The Titan's Fall bug that we used to deal with, you don't have to worry about that anymore. That one completely works, but there is a big one that is currently causing a problem, and it's actually the skeleton mages themselves. So Shadow Mage on the first setup is supposed to grant you 3% damage bonus per mage that you have. So because we have 12 mages are supposed to have 36% increased damage. Now, the actual funny part is that right now it's only granting you up to 3 skeleton mages worth of damage, so only a 9% damage multiplier, because not only does it have an issue with just reading all of them, it's not even really reading the Occult Dominion ones. So the 2 that you get from Occult Dominion would grant you their additional damage, meaning you'd have 15% damage multi, but that's only if you resummon them after you load into an area. And since your mages just do not die in the end game, this basically means that unless you were to kill off all of your mages before you walked into the pit, then resummon all of them, you are most of the time only getting 9% damage bonus from this. So it's a difference of having a 1.09 multiplier and a 1.36 times multiplier. What that means is that the build is currently doing 80% of the damage that it should. Now, if it were to go through the time and effort of resummoning all of your minions so you get at least the 5 from Occult Dominion, that difference would be 1.2 means that you would be doing 84.5% of your current damage. So the build is missing anywhere between like 20 to 25% of its total damage output. That's an entire pit tier at the end, and it's something that would be very obvious. You would feel it a lot if you were to get that bonus. The devs are aware. I've actually sent in like a complete like tutorial video about the bug in its entirety, so I know that they're looking at it. I know that they're prioritizing it. I don't have a date for you yet, but at least for right now, the build is missing a full endgame pit tier's worth of additional damage that just isn't available to it. And this one isn't a bug, or at least it shouldn't be a bug. Maybe it kind of is. But you can actually get the benefits of the second part of Kalan's Edict on this build, and it's actually through Bone Prison. So this requires one of your minions to die to get an additional 20% damage for 3 seconds. But again, your minions just do not die in the end game. But what you can do is you can actually summon Bone Prison and then immediately cancel it. The cancellation of Bone Prison counts as a minion dying, even though Bone Prison doesn't count as a minion, it counts as a summon, and it's only for this thing. So like it doesn't weirdly interact with other stuff. But that's why you'll see in the gameplay footage, if you're watching closely, I'm continuously spamming Bone Prison and then immediately getting rid of it. Upon casting it, you get the 15% damage bonus just from monsters being in it when it's cast, and it applies it's vulnerable. But on top of that, immediately killing it off gets the Kalan's Edict. So that's another thing that I just don't see a lot of people necessarily either understanding or maybe not capitalizing on as much. But again, 20%, that's actually almost an entire pit tier below pit tier 100. So if you're like on 98, 99, you're trying to get all the way up there, making sure that you have good uptime on this Bone Prison spam will get you that pit tier basically for free. But there you go. This is going to come along with an updated build guide. I'll have that down below. I think I'm also going to add a speed farming variant to it because a lot of people like to be able to take this into content that isn't the pit, which I totally understand. So I'll have that added as well. At this point, I think that my build guide is going to be pound for pound, nearly the exact same thing as what's on Max Roll. So I'm going to update my planner in case that's the only thing that you're using, but I'm also going to link the Max Roll build guides down below. They're written by Sirach. Obviously, we collaborate on all of our builds, and we have to go off into the season to test these things and make sure that we're right. But at this point, I think we're pound for pound pretty in line or in sync with our approach to building this particular Mage Minion build. So check out the build planner, check out the build guide, because that's going to have a lot more written information if you're trying to read up on how things work. You don't want to miss out on any of that. But let me know what you think down below in the comments. Have you been playing the build? Have you had different ideas of how you've been piloting it? Did you have any other questions I could possibly answer for you? I try to answer every single comment that I get. It's absolutely shredding my mental health, but like, I guess that's what I signed up for being a content creator, right? Go ahead and subscribe to the channel too if you're brand new here and this is the first thing that you're ever seeing. You don't want to miss out. Or if I come up in your algorithm all the time, if I'm always on your recommended, check to make sure that you have subscribed. Some people just haven't. I just show up in their search. It would help me out a ton. I would love to hit 100,000 subscribers before the end of the year, and we keep stalling out a little bit, but that's mostly because I keep having to take time away from streaming and making content. So if you could click that button, it would mean the world to me. Leave a like on the video. Let me know what you think. Thank you so much for watching this. I truly, truly hope that it helps, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.